doesn't take a prophet to see that Western civilization has lost its way. And it's my belief that we don't know where we're going because we don't know where we've come from. And that is because a long time ago we took two wrong turns, and so we can no longer see the correct road behind us. Sometimes we consider ourselves the heirs to ancient Rome, not knowing what Rome actually stood for, which is violent psychopathy. So we visit the Colosseum, oblivious to the cruelty that it embodies. At other times, we consider ourselves the inheritors of a Judeo-Christian worldview, which, if you think honestly about its precepts, you discern as a deluded psychopath of a worldview. So we visit St. Peter's, oblivious too to the unreason it embodies. We strive at times to be Roman, at times to be Christian, but we find that we end up living under either violent or deluded psychopaths. And we wish very much not to have psychopaths in our lives at all. To find a culture that is neither cruel nor deluded, we actually have to go back a little further, to Europe's very first civilized culture. For we started out, all of us, as Greeks. And there's only one way to regain our sense of self and to recover our sense of direction, and that is to return to where we really came from, to our original flowering as youthful humanity, to the ancient Greeks. The Greeks achieved religion without superstition, justice without weakness, freedom without chaos, order without coercion. They defeated through bravery and intelligence an army twice their size, then one 40 times their size. They beautified their cities and adorned their minds with works of art that would be admired for 24 centuries, as they built and refined a culture that lasted 10 centuries. A lot longer than ours appears as though it's going to last. The culture of the Greeks conquered the world, while ours is slowly being conquered by any culture that craftily appeals to the human rights which the ancient Greeks themselves invented. So I do firmly believe that if you, as an individual, and we as a society, imbibed more of these Greeks, learned from them, remembered who we are and where we came from, we would live happier, freer, braver, richer lives. The ancient Greeks, coincidentally, also lived healthier lives than the modern. They had a longer life expectancy, they were taller and better nourished than 20th century Greeks. So, first things first, as with all history, a proper timeline. The earliest date in Greek history is 776 BC, and this oldest known date in Western history is the same as the oldest known date in Chinese history. Our civilization is precisely as old as China's. In the Buddhist calendar, we live in the year 2565. They date their calendar from the year the Buddha attained enlightenment. In the Islamic world, it is 1443, beginning with the year Muhammad first outlawed fun and formed the virginal Islamic community. And if it were up to me, this 776 BC would be our year zero, and we would be living in the year 2797. This is 97. And from this much longer calendar, I first want you to remember your Einstein. The distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. And then I want you to rid yourself at once of any notion of antiquity. Historical time, even more so than physical time, is a construct, and there was no antiquity. Ancient Greece and ancient Rome are as different from each other in their forms and their aims as were Renaissance Italy and the British Empire. But the study of Rome seems to be more popular, and I cannot for the life of me fathom why. The Greeks stood for independence and decentralization. The Romans stood for subjection and control. The Greeks lived freedom. The Romans used the word liberty as their propaganda. The Greek bettered himself through healthy competition. The Roman entertained himself with savage spectacles. The Romans stand for conquering distant lands, while the Greek stands in a little part of his own world he calls home, and he cultivates it. The Greek poet ponders how best to live the most effective life. The Roman poet tries to figure out how not to live life at all. As well, Greece and Rome are separated by centuries, 4.5 of them. From 480 BC, the beginning of classical Greece, to the triumph of Julius Caesar, stand 436 years, the same amount of time that stands between us and Queen Elizabeth. We are not Elizabethans. The Romans were not Greeks. Then comes the C word. But from the beginning of Western civilization, 776 BC, until at least 100 AD, there is no Christianity. The same amount of time separates Homer's Achilles and Jesus of Nazareth as it does you and Dante. 900 years out of 2800, almost a third. And Christianity becomes the longest interlude between us and the Greeks, and I think not a necessarily brilliant one, for while the Christian lives on hope, the Greek lives for action. The Greek endeavors to understand the reality he lives in, while Christians ponder the nature of the creator they themselves created. The believing Christian looks forward to the glorious eternity that awaits her, and so devalues the present. While the Greek knows that there's not a shred of evidence for an afterlife, and thrives for glory now, and in this world. Yet our calendar, and so our mindset, is divided between the years leading up to Jesus and the years leading down from him. This is a grave mental and spiritual error. After the ancient Greeks, Western history takes two wrong turns. The first is the Roman wrong turn, leading us down the path of power, control, violence, bureaucracy, hypocrisy, and the worship of individuals. The second is the Christian wrong turn, leading us down the path of delusion, superstition, fear, illiteracy, smallness of life, bureaucracy, hypocrisy, and the worship of one individual. And so, with these talks, I hope to show you the nature of the path before we twice turned off it. Each of these talks will outline a facet of Greek thought or Greek life that is utterly missing from our own time, a facet whose absence is contributing to our decline and to our general unhappiness, a facet that, if properly understood and earnestly striven for, would make your life, our lives, all the more enjoyable. Now that you've gotten rid of the Christian division of time and of any notion of antiquity, you can properly divide recorded history into a line. For 1300 years of it lives ancient Greece. For Greek culture does conquer the Roman mind. Then, around 500 AD, a Roman emperor prohibits the teaching of law and philosophy at Athens, and the Parthenon is converted into a church. 46% of recorded history revolves around the Greeks. Then, once Armenia becomes the first Christian kingdom, just over half of recorded history is Christianity. The tail end here is something else entirely. Once it's discovered by science that the human mind can be manipulated through advertising, and once it's agreed upon by capitalism that it ought to be manipulated, we come to consumerism and are no longer in the same world. I'll let you decide what we're becoming. And with that timeline, welcome to the very first new Cavalier lecture on Ancient Audacity. I hope with these talks to bring to light and to life several aspects of ancient Greece that illuminate and should inform our own day and age, and your life. It does mine. From the aboriginal virtues of Europe to the brilliance of philosophia, a love of wisdom, philosophy, to the invention of freedom, to the rational conquest of death, and to the world's greatest poetry, I do, yes, get carried away, but time and time again, I leave these Greeks for a couple of months, but inevitably in my reading I come back to them, and every time I do, I am again and again astonished at their audacity, the clearness of their thought, the freedom of their communal lives, the fullness and happiness of their individual lives. And now that you've begun to divest yourself of any confusion between Roman and Greek, and now that you've started disentangling your mind from its Christian web, as you begin to correct these two wrong turns, strap yourselves in, subscribe to this channel, and get ready to meet the brilliant bunch of bearded bad-arses who called themselves the Hellenes, but who we call the ancient Greeks.